So if we are looking at just the prevalence of HIV AIDS among this age bracket, maybe we see historically where it may have come from.
We might have come from.
Yeah, we see historically where it may have come from. So then if you say that you cannot have age-appropriate sexuality education for children,
what are we saying?
What are we saying for the generation that is coming?
Well, Nyambura, it is nice to be back for the second part of it. And the fact that we want to have this conversation separate from, the masterclass on how policies and laws are made around sexual and reproductive health rights. So thank you very much. But as we were speaking between you and a podcast strategist, I realized that sometimes we have conversations as, experts differently. Like I will have a conversation around sexual and reproductive health rights as an activist or just a general practitioner, but there's too much that could be missed in between. And just listening to two lawyers, I'm like, this is why lawyers will take this ground and the rest of us will not understand. But I think for me, it's how do we pour into each other to make sure we're building onto the blocks. Having said that, this part is about comprehensive sexual education. What are the misconceptions and what are the myths around what is currently the discussion in public today in Kenya?
Glad to be back for the second part of this, Nyambura. Thank you once again for having me. Now, we can't even decide on what to call it. Comprehensive sexuality education, human sexuality education.
Yeah, I remember just stopping about, is this sexuality? Is it sexual education? What is it?
Yes. So different people prefer to adopt different terms because of some undertones that could be suggested with the use of some terms such as comprehensive. And maybe the idea behind that would be wanting to leave out some bits, wanting to cover everything, wanting to make it age appropriate. So my preferred term to use is age appropriate sexuality education.
Okay.
Yes.
So we should say age appropriate sexuality
education. That's my that's my preferred topic, topic sentence, but you can pick your own. And perhaps I will go on to tell you why I prefer age-appropriate sexuality education. Okay. So the World Health Organization, and with this we fully agree, has banded adolescents as human beings between the age of 10 to 19.
Yes.
So perhaps you could say 10 is too early. Or you could say...
we had that discussion. Is it 14? Is it 10? Yeah.
Yeah. So we have mirrored that in the draft adolescents and young people's reproductive health policy, for which validation is still undergoing. And I think we decided on 10. I say we because... Kenyan, we decided on 10 because the Kenya Demographic Health Survey has actually shown that girls are receiving their monthly flow from the tender age of 10 years onwards. And remember, what is adolescence really? Isn't it the onset of puberty?
It is.
Yeah. So I remember when I was growing up, it used to be between 13 and 19 because of the teen. Yeah. So we used to think that teenagehood is synonymous with adolescence.
That's true. I mean, for a long time, even now, they are juxtaposed and used together.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now when you band them between 10 to 19, you might think that 10, a 10-year-old kid, they're in grade what right now?
4.
Okay.
3. Yeah.
4, yeah? So grade 4. And a 19-year-old is in grade?
Form 1 or 2. No, actually from 3. Gosh.
Even from 4.
Oh, gosh. This is my Lisa.
Yeah, they've wrapped up their high school education, right?
Yeah.
So you see, when you band them together, you might think that a 10-year-old has got very different needs from a 19-year-old. But this whole bracket, even if you were to recall the time between when you are 10 and 19, this is when your body just starts having changes that are carrying you from childhood into young adulthood, right? And we only use the word adult because it's past 18. And maybe at this point, then we start talking about consent and things like that. But scientifically, so many things could be happening that have nothing to do with the legal assumption
Frameworks.
of when you're competent enough to take some decisions,
Mhm.
right? So if you're having girls from the tender age of 10 receiving their monthly flow, then don't you think it's necessary for us to speak to them about this? Because especially if they're in grade 4, remember, I don't know, does grade translate to standard?
Standard.
You know, when I went to
Well-
school, to standard. I can't believe I'm saying when I went to school. I sound like my
How
mother.
Here you are. We are old.
Okay. So I remember that the curriculum in class 6 is the one that,
Oh
drew
yeah.
drew
From
for
science.
us. Even science, just science, yeah?
Yeah.
Science as we knew it, it drew for us the female reproductive system, the male reproductive system. We were able to just label parts. Maybe we could know what the use of some of these parts were, but some of us were slowly now living the realities of what the use of these parts are, as far as just preparing you for the next stage of life goes,
Yeah.
right? So if we start having age appropriate messaging for children on just what's going on with their bodies.
Yeah.
Remember when we started the first episode, we mentioned that SRHR is sexuality education, sexuality rights, sexual rights, reproductive rights, sexual health, reproductive health, right?
Yeah.
So this is your reproductive system. It is developing. This is what is going to give rise to now sexual rights and sexual health,
right?
Yes. So, and sometimes we even have sexual health issues all the way since 10 years, because
That's true.
just looking at Sexual Offences Act of 2006, we have the crime of defilement. So how exactly then do we speak to kids at this age and tell them that this is your private space? Nobody's supposed to violate you by either touching or exposing or doing anything with this space, which is your private space. You see, that is also just age-appropriate sexuality education, because then at this point, you cushion this kid to know that this is not supposed to happen to me at this age.
It's information.
Right? And if it happens, I need to go and tell my mother, my father, my guardian, my older sister, whoever it is you feel comfortable with. So some of the people who are against the introduction of this human sexuality education, which is comprehensive, state that if you preempt this for kids, then you bring into their knowledge things which were previously unknown. But the truth, Nyambura, is that kids know these things.
This is true, especially in the digital and free internet era that we live in.
Yes, they know these things. And if a parent doesn't set the agenda in their home and say, okay, I as Nyambura, and let's say my husband's name is whoever he is.
Kamau.
Yes, Kamau. So I as Nyambura and Kamau, we are going to decide on this is what we would like our kids to adhere to or align to. It just has enough of what is essential for their uptake, for them to be safe, also just for harm reduction. And so we will package it like this, and this is how we will deliver it. I mean, there is nothing Western about this concept, because even as far as initiation rites go, I know I'm from, my ethnicity is Kikuyu, and my mother tells me that there used to be rites of passage.
Yes.
That would just also prepare you.
Most communities actually have rites of passage. Yeah.
Yes, they did. And this information was imparted to children. Maybe we don't know what the contents were, but they were enough and sufficient for the uptake then, for the purposes of the time. So then should in society also just have a manner of delivering the same information, or the information as they would like to package it, for holistic development of the kid. I mean, it must be really confusing for a child to wonder, why is this happening to me? You know, you start having breast budding and they're shy. Or in school, questions are asked about, why does this one carry this to school? Yeah. Why does this one carry menstrual hygiene products to school? Why does the other one not? Is there any reason to feel like you're a late bloomer because the onset of your menstrual flow is not here yet? You know, even just what are they called? So psychological responses to the kids' needs. Yes.
I think when you said harm reduction, for me, it's all those things where even for late bloomers who might not have the menstrual cycles at that point, or might not develop, tend to ask themselves why, or the others are bullied, you know.
Okay, so let me just mention something that could maybe bring in the aspect of reproductive health at this point. So what do you know about the hymen?
that it regenerates, and I guess that's much of it.
Okay, so that's new. So for the longest
I hope I'm
time,
not doing misinformation here.
I actually don't know whether that's true. You tell me. So what I was actually hoping to mention is that contrary to popular belief, the hymen has got very little to do with virginity. And what I know from, medical experts is that it is not a covering that covers the entire of the opening of the reproductive system of a woman, and rather it is just like a tissue, a
Okay.
tissue, a piece of flesh.
A lining,
yes, yeah. And sometimes it covers the entire space. And so when the onset of the menstrual flow is here, for some kids, they can't have it yet. And so they start having accumulation at that area. And so they need to have like a minor surgical procedure so that it is opened up and now the flow has its way.
I didn't
because
even
it
know
accumulates, it becomes painful.
As an adult of that many years, I did not know
Most
that.
people actually don't. And I also probably would not have known if I probably had never come across an individual like this. But you see, the reason why maybe I'm seated on set here is because when we work in sexual and reproductive health and rights, you get to hear of all these many different stories. You see the same way your hair grows and the way my hair grows differently. That happens for every other part of the body for other people. So the reason why my eyes are like this, the reason why my fingernails grow in a different manner from yours. Same thing happens with the rest of your body. So now can you imagine the confusion in a 12-year-old girl for whom the menses already began, but there's no flow yet because of probably what I may call, quote unquote, a situation that needs correction by way of a minor surgical procedure. So you see, if
they don't have access to the information,
they don't know. Service. And perhaps also the parents would not know, right? Yeah. But it is only after speaking to the parents about I'm experiencing pain in this area, and the parent now giving consent or actually thinking that, we need to go to hospital for this, and not just to give over-the-counter medication for any pain that could be experienced. Because remember, if let's just say today I am the mother of a daughter, which I'm really looking forward to, and and my kid comes up to me and says, "Mommy, I'm having pain in this space." I know they haven't received their menstrual flow yet, so I'll be like, what could that be? I am sure it's not dysmenorrhea. So what could that be exactly, right? So if I don't take this kid to seek help. Yes, to seek help or medical intervention. There's no way for me to find out. So this brings in the concept of the Children's Act of 2022 requires consent from guardians for children. Children is anybody under the age of 18 to access healthcare, either of reproductive nature or otherwise. Yes. So parents have got to be really real. Parents have got to be real, let's respond to matters as they arise. I know it's a delicate balance, between child protection, harm reduction, also exactly what you'd like your kids to know. Maybe you did know this as a kid and you didn't think it was necessary, but times are changing.
That's true.
Yeah, times are changing. This is probably necessary. So let's just say that it would be really great for kids not to be so confused, because kids will go looking. Yeah, they'll go looking and they will fill in that gap that the parent is not providing in terms of information on what's going on. Yeah. With either what they're hearing in school. And remember, now in school, there's a pool of everything. There's kids from all over. Your kid will find out information. So how about then you be strategic by preempting the information the way you would like it to be delivered, and please let's just advocate for it to be packaged in a way that is realistic and necessary for use. Whether other things are add-ons, remember, we are not asking for us to just tell kids that you could be this or that. We are not asking them to go and explore. No. Can we just introduce slowly that at this point, girls get menses?
Age appropriate.
Yes, gradual. At this point, you could expect a boy to having changes in the way their voice sounds. This happens in the morning when you wake up.
I can't imagine that that's a conversation we have to have, yet it's required for even living. I can't, it baffles me that we have decided that this is a conversation that is up for contention.
So it is necessary, and it is also, if I may say, a provision in the Constitution, because when you look at, I think, the last provision of Article 43, the one that bundles together socioeconomic rights. So if it puts together health, sanitation, hunger, What else is there? Health, sanitation, hunger, housing, and then it has education at the bottom.
Yeah.
Then this is a socioeconomic right, and maybe if we are asking for the introduction of age-appropriate sexuality education for children, then we are doing this because one, it is their right. Two, Article 53 then instead now talks to us about best interest of the kid. So it is in the best interest of the kid that they have holistic development. Remember, there's also just the issue of the triple threat for among teenagers. So there's prevalence of HIV and AIDS.
Yeah, that's a question I was going to say, because when within this uproar, we're missing, the prevalence of HIV and teen pregnancies. But please carry on.
Okay. So we are going to have a very difficult time addressing issues of teenage pregnancies, addressing prevalence rates among teenagers, prevalence rate for HIV among adolescents. We are also going to have the issues of sexual and gender-based violence, right? So this is the triple threat, the way we are looking at it. So it might surprise you to find out that Kenya has been ranked third on the global list for rates of teenage pregnancies. So, the position legally in Kenya is that if you're under the age of 18 and somebody has had carnal knowledge of you, then that means you have been defiled, right? We have redress mechanisms for this. We do, right? So, but how many kids know that they can go and speak to their parents about this, especially if the perpetrators are people who are closely known to them?
And most of the times, it's usually people close.
Unfortunately. Yeah. So we also have the issue of HIV prevalence rate. So let's just dial back a bit. So late 80s, late 90s. 1999, I think around 2000, and I think it's the year 2000 when HIV/AIDS was declared a pandemic in Kenya. Yeah. I think Moi was president then.
Was he? Oh, he was.
Yeah.
Because those are many centuries.
Yeah, the turn of the millennium. So Moi was the president. So at this point, so many people have not tested their status. They don't know. We don't have prevention of mother-to-child transmission yet. Remember, we only received PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Fund for HIV and AIDS. And this was for mitigating mitigating the consequences of HIV and AIDS in Africa. So PEPFAR really helped. So not only with diagnostics, testing, prevention of mother-to-child transmission, life-supporting drugs by way of antiretrovirals, but can you imagine now just getting over the stigma bit? So maybe that took us to around, actually up to today, we have not yet gotten over the stigma.
No, I was going to say, but I don't think the stigma around HIV and AIDS
still here with us, but people who are still of reproductive age were still reproducing. So if the advent of prevention of mother-to-child transmission only found us in like 2005, 2007, 2010, then that means that there is a possibility that the children who were born around that time of parents who were living with HIV could have been born living positively. So in 2023, these children are how old
when you
now?
say it like that, gosh, it's such a
so if you do the math, so 2023 minus 2003, 2005, they're like 18, 19, 20. So these kids are born living with HIV. Yeah. So for no fault of their own. I know I shouldn't mention that, but perhaps the kids need some understanding that then it may have been no fault of their own, but there is an obligation onwards to prevent prevalence. Yeah. So if we're looking at just the prevalence of HIV/AIDS among this age bracket, maybe we see historically where it may have come from.
We might have come from.
Yeah, we see historically where it may have come from. So then if you say that you cannot have age-appropriate sexuality education for children,
what are we saying?
What are we saying for the generation that is coming? What then are we saying about that? And what else had you asked me about the...
No, I was saying no, I think the question was generally, I know you've tackled most of it, is what are we missing in terms of when we have this noise around comprehensive sexuality education, age appropriate, as you said it. What are we missing in terms of teen pregnancies, in terms of HIV and AIDS prevalence, but also the SGBV around? Because I think SGBV is actually given light when it's adults and not what happens among youth and adolescents. So I think you have answered most of it, unless you have something else to add to that.
So something else I could also just mention is probably parents want it to remain in their ambit. They want to have control over what to tell their kids. Then nothing is just easier than them to just have the conversation on it. But now, if we feel they need to have some regulation around how it's done, because the government has actually conducted studies. So the KDHS survey, Kenya Demographic Health Survey for 2022, placed the percentages for teenage pregnancy at 10 to 15, around there. So actually
Wow.
10. So it was down to 14 from
That's
previously
heartbreaking.
at 10%. So either we are saying that we are going to bury our heads in the sand and not pass any laws based on a base that is evidential, and just say, no, this is not happening. We
Yeah.
just say this is not happening. So back to the theme, which is just religious norms and SRHR. In my interaction with leaders from religious spaces, they actually tell us, hey, you guys, these are actually challenges we are faced with every day. Remember, we are leaders in these spaces. You can go to the chief and say, so you can only go to the chief and say, there is my kid was allegedly defiled. So there is a different redress mechanism for that through the courts. Yeah. Whether it is efficient or not is a different question, not for this platform.
Yeah.
But now you will go to religious leaders and you're trying to seek, reconciliation. You're also just trying to seek, okay, how do we preempt this information so that we are not then doing mitigating the consequences of the afterwards. Yeah. We're not handling the aftermath. Right? So religious leaders have actually spoken to us and they've said, hey, is it possible for you guys to train us? Because we are facing these challenges every day. So one of the things I've found to be very effective in tackling this issue is the hardwired approach of communication really comes in handy. When
what do you mean when you say hardwired? I think I have.
Yeah, hardwired approach.
Yeah.
Okay. So sometimes we like to think that things happen to other people. So for instance, up until you have experienced a loss yourself, you only think losses happen elsewhere. So it's only sometimes when you wear the shoe, when you know where it pinches.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you come to a religious leader and they tell you, my child, this happened to my child, then now they get perspective. So all this time it used to be Nyambura's child, Jambi's child, Lucas's child, but now it's my child. And then finally now they can see things the same way you see them. But now you see there is an obligation that comes with holding that office of religious leader.
Yeah.
And therefore are we saying that we are asking religious leaders to, join the rest of CSO movements and just parents who are saying that how about churches come up with, like what I've seen my church do. So we have alternative masses for the youth. Then afterwards, they usually have programs where people speak to them about what's happening in their age brackets, what's happening in their relations with other young persons, what's happening with their bodies. How do you just respond to this as a young Catholic person?
Yeah.
So
that's helpful.
Are we asking then religious leaders to just set the tone for the conversation? Because remember, the book of Jeremiah says what? That God has got plans for us. Plans not to harm us, but plans for our prosperity. Right? So isn't this just in line with the call then?
I like the way you've just wrapped that fabric together. Yeah. And I think for me, the word that remains is that no matter what we are doing, whether we are activists or religious leaders or lawyers like you and Ms. Jambi, is that we have to focus on the best interest of the young people, but also harm reduction. How we wrap up this is that I want you to give us a parting shot in terms of what policy reforms should be in place to mitigate the impact of religious norms on SGBV and sexual reproductive rights.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of history once again, because we need to know where we are right now, where they come from.
Yes. I like that you do that so that we're not speaking out of context.
Yes. Yeah. So we need to know where we came from. So again, let's go back to late 80s, early 90s. Structural adjustment programs are just coming in.
SAPs.
Yeah, they're just coming in.
Yeah.
Government is not delivering on aspects such as education, health, and what HIV/AIDS pandemic is on us.
The country was in shambles.
Yes, it's upon us. So now evangelicism kicks in to fill in this socio-economic gap. because then they are giving answers to all these three things, right? So when you think of religious norms, so I know I've been speaking most of my every time I mention my religion, I say I'm Catholic, and maybe this is what we've done before. Then we have Pentecostal.
Yeah, Pentecostals and evangelicals.
Yeah,
Yes.
then we have evangelicals. So when we think of Pentecostals, maybe we think of how they organize. So think of institutionalized churches, we think of some processes, and then evangelical, maybe for lack of a better word, the personal enterprise of who the pastor is, and maybe with their spouse, or maybe even now unmarried women who are now the personal enterprise for evangelical churches.
Good for them, but gosh, yes, they're creating havoc. Yeah.
So if you
in terms of the evangelical and stepping in into
to cover this gap, right? So if we had them come in to say that maybe we can have homeschooling in response to inadequate schools, and then now just other churches coming up with mission schools and mission hospitals, and also just having the same apply with comprehensive sexuality education, because then we'll say the state cannot agree on what to do. Parents are also not looking like they are shying away from this conversation because either it wasn't necessary in their time, they don't have time for it. And unfortunately, Nyambura, wherever we go in our work as advocates for sexual and reproductive health and rights for even children, all kids will say our parents don't have time
that is true.
To have these conversations with us. It doesn't matter what economic background you fall in. So middle class people are saying that, people below the middle class, people above the middle class, all of them say our parents don't have time to do this. So how about then religious persons lead this conversation now by creating, the norms? If they're going to be giving us practical solutions to societal problems, if they identify that, teenage pregnancies are a societal problems, how about they come in to fill in that gap? This would be very positive. It could be also very progressive. It is also so much easier for them to reach consensus, because then the backdrop is the provisions of the Bible. And this is both female religious leaders, this is also male religious leaders, because we need in the protective aspect, the nurturing aspect, because this is the delicate balance again we were speaking about earlier on, when we stated that on one hand, you really think the kid needs this information. You really can't decide how much information is necessary and for what use, because you're like, they will figure it out anyway. Eventually, they will have to. And on the other hand, you're also thinking, how will I protect them? So this delicate balance, let's just say that if we are professing a certain creed and we have trusted the church to advise us on issues such as marriage, our way of life, the medical interventions we accept, then how about they also just come in to fill in this gap, and then maybe government is going to pick up and now put it into the package of basic education.
What you're saying is that the religious leaders actually have to take the responsibility.
We ask them to. I mean, it would be great if they did that. I think this is service to humanity, and really it would also be moving the vertical spirituality to fit, they would actually be catering to the flock.
Yes, that is true.
They would be catering to the flock.
Yeah. Think, I would say there are a few religious leaders that are committed to this conversation, and we see them. But I think because of the institutionalism that we see and the issues that come up when you talk about comprehensive sexuality education, age appropriate, I am not very convinced that will happen. But yes, as you say, we hope they can take up the responsibility, because what I feel like they're also the missing point between both the government and the masses, just adopting to, yes, we need to have a standardized way of approaching this. And so long as the conversation remains in the pulpits where, we talk about it like it's a vice, it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just for anybody who may be listening to this and would want to just understand the involvement of the church and the state in Kenya, there's a really nice article by Wandi and Joya. It was published on The Elephant.
The Elephant.
Yes, they could really just look at it and see where we've come from, what the church has been in a position to achieve in the past, what they could do right now, and just also to form a basis for the call to action that I've just made for religious leaders to lead the conversation, right? Because they have led so many previous conversations.
That's true.
Even just political ones. Yeah, so
I think it's the lack of investment or the moralization of this conversation.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I really agree with you.
Miss Nyambura,
Yeah.
MC, thank you very much for having this conversation with us. I am sure the first conversation we will all be taking notes, and the second one is that we are aligning to making sure that this the uproar of comprehensive sexuality education, age appropriate, a must. Now I have to always add that age appropriate is hard, but also hard by the right stakeholders, so that we're not missing a whole generation when we speak at each other. Asante sana. This has been Swaiba, the Audible African Woman, faith, freedom, feminism, and freedom. Please listen up and leave us your comments. Thank you.
So if we are looking at just the prevalence of HIV/AIDS among this age bracket, maybe we see historically where it may have come from.
We might have come from.
Yeah, we see historically where it may have come from. So then if you say that you cannot have age-appropriate sexuality education for children,
what are we saying?
What are we saying for the generation that is coming?